Joe, Tennessee versus Oklahoma. Tennessee goes into Norman and takes care of business, winning that game 25-15. Listen, I'm going to start it off here. Normally, I kick it off to you, okay? But during the offseason, you and I do deep dives on every single team. And when we got to Oklahoma, you and I discussed about how I did not feel that their offensive line was going to be good because they brought in so many guys from the portal in patchwork to try to fix that position. Well, this was really the true first test that they had against a really good opponent in Tennessee that they were put to the task. And I thought that they played a really poor game. When you were going throughout the game, I know you were live tweeting this, but when you were going through the game, what did you think when you were watching this game live?
Yeah, specifically talking about Oklahoma, everything that we knew coming into this year with the offensive line, it came to fruition, and it came to fruition very quickly. I mean, talk about a matchup where you have to deal with a team like Tennessee that has a ridiculous amount of depth on their defensive line and their front seven, and they can just keep rotating guys in. When you have that many new faces, I don't care how good they are, they could be the best offensive linemen in the country coming to play together. By week 4, they're not going to have the necessary cohesiveness and chemistry to play at a high enough level. And they were relentless. They came after Jackson Arnold, and that was what led to a lot of the mistakes. They only ended up giving up 3 sacks, but that number I don't think is indicative of the performance that we watched, where they got pushed around, they got manhandled, they gave up a ton of guys slipping through cracks, coming downhill, making plays at the line of scrimmage, stopping runs for short gains. That offensive line right now is not built to sustain, I think, the entire season of SEC play. I'm not melting down with Oklahoma, Blake. I'm not doing that. I'm not ready to do that. I think that this team is still absolutely bowl eligible at the end of the year, and they're going to be a bowl team. 8-4, 7-5 is accomplishable, but for any Oklahoma fan that thought they were going to compete for an SEC title this year and a playoff berth, they were proven wrong. They are in a tier below the top teams in the SEC right now.
I want to see what happens. And look, first off, we always talk about the winners first, but I thought we had to have
it's important.
Well, we had to have an exception to this rule, but considering all the hate that we took during the offseason and talking about Oklahoma, I'm with you on when you just stated I'm not out on Oklahoma. Look, I was actually a little bit surprised that they went to Michael Hawkins. I see why they did. The kid's just a playmaker. So when Michael Hawkins came in the game, man, they were just a different team. They were able to score points. I know that it's got a lot to do with his running ability, and I don't necessarily think Jackson Arnold played bad. I mean, he went 7-16. But he didn't play good. But Michael Hawkins gives you a different element. But Joe, here's the problem that I have, and I don't blame Jackson Arnold on this a lot, to be real with you, even though he had 2 turnovers. The problem I had is Oklahoma ran for 36 yards.
That's insane. 222 total yards of offense. That is an ass kicking.
Well, I look at Michael Hawkins, didn't even play the whole game, and he was their leading rusher. Joey had 12 carries for 22 yards. They can't line up and run the football. And Joe, you cannot in the Big Ten or the SEC, if you can't run the football with anybody and get yards on the ground, you're going to lose a lot of football games, even though their defense is really good. And their defense kept them in this game throughout. I mean, their defense at times did some really good things. I thought their DBs played well. Now, did they give up some busts? Yeah, Brew McCoy had a couple of really good catches. But I look at them, Joe, it's just that they're so weak along the offensive line that Michael Hawkins is the only way that I think that you're going to be able to survive to some extent in some of these high-profile games that you're going to play down the stretch. By the way, this is not the best defensive line you're going to face. It's not the best front seven that you're going to face. By the way, in a couple of weeks, you're going to face a really crazy one. Now, I know that game's a rivalry game, and Texas made a playoff, and Oklahoma beat them last year. That's a completely different situation. Joe, they're very inexperienced, and inexperienced at quarterback. They're inexperienced at playing together along the offensive line. I just think that they have such a massive issue offensively that I don't know where they go from here outside of trying to give Michael Hawkins a shot and see what happens there. I know that and I don't want to paint him as a saving grace here.
He's a true freshman, so he's kind of like take it with a grain of salt.
Well, and here's another thing. I felt like at a lot of times that he was so green that it benefited him. Right? Like, hey man, my first read's not there. I'm running. I'm out of here. I'm not sticking around here. And it benefited him. But look, man, I don't really want to come in here and blame Jackson Arnold. By the way, Deion Burks was your second leading rusher because 2 passes go behind the line of scrimmage. He had 2 carries technically for 18 yards. You're not getting the ball to him deep. Joe, you can protect for 2.5 seconds to throw him a fade pass. Like, I mean, the game plan, everything that they're doing offensively, I thought was disjointed, and I don't know their identity offensively, which I think is the biggest problem.
That was one of the bigger things for me coming into this game is that you've got a true speedster in Deion Burks, and we haven't even gotten to see him stretch the field. They don't take shots or even try to. I know that there's a fear of Jackson Arnold taking pressures up until the point that Hawkins came into the game, that you don't want to take a big sack, but you need to at least instill some fear in a defense that those shots are there. I felt like that they weren't. And I don't know if it's also because Arnold isn't willing to take those shots and he's being timid, but the amount of pressure that he was seeing, I can understand why he would be timid, why he would be afraid of
they didn't
being
have
overly
to do
aggressive.
Anything. Well, Tennessee didn't have to do anything special. They sent 4 a lot of times.
Yes.
And so
that was what led to the interceptions, is that they were playing such great coverage that they were just sitting and waiting for him to make a mistake.
It also was relation to the fumble, which I know Oklahoma fans are going to say it's not a fumble, but a pass at the line of scrimmage or behind is technically a lateral or behind the line, a lateral pass. So, I mean, even that. I mean, Joe, there comes a point, though, like I don't know if I can come in here and ridicule or talk anything bad about Arnold. I don't think that they have an identity. I don't think that that's on him.
No, I don't think that's. This is why, like, I don't want to hear anybody really this week saying that Jackson Arnold stinks and like he's the reason why they're losing and they're going to be bad this year. He's in a very messy situation, and it's sad to say that Hawkins does probably need to start, because having the level of mobility and also the willingness to just scramble, and after that first read doesn't open, he is going to have a much easier time surviving the amount of pressure that either quarterback is going to face for the rest of the season. I will say a lot
of stress on you. He put a lot of stress on Tennessee in that second half.
Right, because as soon as they rushed upfield, space cleared out, and then he was gone. Would scramble. My biggest thing,
too, man, kid's really tough.
My biggest thing here with Oklahoma, though, Blake, it's disappointing because this defense is phenomenal. Like that defense is really freaking good. They were able to get after Nico and lead to him making mistakes. And if it wasn't for silly, stupid shit happening with Oklahoma, giving the ball right back a couple of plays later, twice in this game,
they would have blown him out.
It would have been a completely different football game.
Let me ask you this rudely.
Okay.
I don't know if I necessarily see it like that with Oklahoma defensively. I thought their secondary played well, but let me throw this at you. Dylan Sampson, 24 carries, 92 yards. Bishop, 16 carries, 65 yards. Joe, I'm going to be real with you. They got dominated along the line of scrimmage.
Well, I would push back on that because I thought that they played well against the run in the beginning of the game, and they were generating pressures in the beginning of the game. They got their asses kicked in time of possession. It felt like they were just grinded down by the end of it.
Tennessee. And look, here's another thing, and we'll talk about Tennessee next.
Yes.
Bro, Hypo went in there and played bully ball, which we've never seen him do. Brother, they went in there and played bully ball with him, and they took it to him. And we've never seen Josh do that, ever. Joe, if I would have told you that Nico would have had 21 passing attempts in this game, you would have said, oh, man, they blew him out, whatever. No, it wasn't necessarily the case. They just lined up and 3 yards in a cloud of dust. Look, man, I think that, like, Demonic Williams, I thought he played a good game.
Yeah.
I thought they did some good things in the interior, but, Joe, they had no fear. And you know what? They knew what they had to do to win the game. They got out-coached. They got outplayed. And they're just a better program at the current moment. And I hate to say it like that, but let me throw this too, since it's the Oklahoma segment. Got to be careful when an emotional guy as a head coach comes in there and wants this one more than you do. Because I felt like Tennessee all week wanted this more than you did, and it played out on the field.
I also, and Oklahoma fans might get mad at me saying this, I think this game would have been a lot more lopsided if Hypo clearly didn't take his foot off the gas.
And he did. And he did. He took
right,
his foot off the gas.
For a very obvious reason. He doesn't want to go out there and embarrass his alma mater, which is very few and far between for head coaches. But that score should have been very different. Like when they wanted, the offensive line wanted to go for it on fourth down to like really finish them off, and they kicked the field goal instead at the end of the game. That game, we all know here, that score is not reflective of how close that game actually was.
Well, 151 rushing yards they gave up. They lined up and bullied you. Dylan Sampson had a great game. But, Joe, here's the biggest stat for me. And I don't like always using stats, but here's the biggest thing that I look at in this game. Oklahoma had 1.1 yards per rush. 1.1 yards per rush. That's not Oklahoma football. And I hate to say this, and I know we're going to get in trouble by saying this. The bottom line is it's only going to get worse. Because Joe, that's not the best defense you're going to see. It's not the best front seven you're going to see, and this has a very strong chance of getting worse. So I think that they got to start Hawkins. That's what I would say to them.
This video is sponsored by the online fitness training camp presented by Chris Gates Fitness. When I first started talking about Chris, about partnering with our show, not only was I excited to have a fitness sponsor for our pod, but more importantly, when I found out about how he can help people achieve their goals, I was even more bought in, because when the football season starts, it is so tough to stay on top of things and also to be able to enjoy yourself on Saturdays when it's game day. With Chris Gates Fitness's online training camp, you're going to be able to effectively stay focused, consistent, burn fat, build muscle, and do it with a like-minded community of individuals working towards the same thing. On top of this, you're going to be able to get direct coaching from Chris and the ability to ask him questions with an access to a live Q&A where you can get direct personalized support from Chris himself. Don't wait any longer. If you're trying to get in shape during this fall and you want to be able to do it with the right support system, head on over to chrisgatesfitness.com/training camp or click the link in the description. And you need to do it today because you can get the first month. Personal training is expensive, folks. The first month for only $10 when you use that code RuffinoJoe. Don't wait any longer. Head on over there. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.